Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today for our Shopsmith tutorial, I've got the headstock removed here, and we're going to go through and we're going to tear it down piece by piece so you can see how to tear it down and actually get down to the bearings, so you can test those bearings by hand to see whether they're worn out or if they're rattling or squeaking on you, and see if you need to replace those. If you just bought a Shopsmith, I highly recommend doing this teardown. It will let you know whether you have anything to worry about, and that way you can replace the bearings before something bad happens and they wear out while you're running and just tear things apart worse than you ever wanted them to be. So, alright, let's get started. Okay, so I got the headstock turned around. The first thing that we're going to want to do is remove this back cover, but before we can do that, we need to remove both of these shaft extensions so that we can get the cover off. Now all we need is a straight screwdriver, and we can back these screws out. There should be one on this side, and then one on the bottom. And then we'll just take this and lay it right on its face, gently of course. I take that back, there's only 2 screws. So we'll lift that off and remove that. So I've slid it back on the bench. The next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to remove the motor component down here so that we can get the belt off and we can actually get into the internal components. So as you can see, I got a little piece of wood over here. This is basically just leaning on. I'm still keeping it held up myself for the most part. And as you can see, I've got it slid back on the bench a little bit so that the cable, the power cable hangs off, so we're not kinking that, bending that all out of the way. Oh, there it's settled. So at that point, what I want to do is lay this on its back. And remove this last screw. And at that point, this whole thing should tip. So you should be able to get this belt off. You just pry it up on one end and then rotate that. And that'll allow you to get your motor disconnected from the rest. So in order to get this motor completely disconnected without having to pull it out of the case here, you can see it's got some screws down here. I'm going to rotate this whole thing. So, not sure if you can see it from there, but your switch has a screw around it. I found the easiest way is to take a somewhat narrow straight screwdriver, and you can slide it into one of those slots and then give it a little turn, and then it should come loose for you. And then what you want to do is slide your motor a little bit to the side so you can get your arm inside of this, and you want to hold the back side of that switch and unscrew that screw. Or I should say, I guess it's more of a nut than a screw. But we'll unscrew that all the way. And once that's off, then we can remove that switch altogether, and that'll allow us to completely disconnect the motor from the headstock. So there you go. We'll slide that out. And keep an eye on the orientation of your cables inside of your headstock so you can reroute them the same when you go back in. And there we go. Now we can take that out and we can blow it out, make sure there's no dust in it, clean out any sawdust that's in there, and kind of get things cleaned up. Alright, so we have that turned around here so you can see the sheave here and the quill up top. And then you got your worm gear here to adjust your speed. The belt's still on here, and this is an older style. Like I said, it's a 60s model, so it doesn't have the V belt or serpentine belt, if you will. This one still has I'm not exactly sure what it's called. I don't remember, but it's one of the ribs that go across the belt instead of around the length. So there's a cover in the back here. We'll pop that off. That's just held on by spring tension. Alright, so the next thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to, now that we've got it apart and the belt is disconnected, you can see how this wheel will spin freely. That means that we can actually spin the speed control without having to worry about damaging this spring here and the bearing behind it. You can see it kind of already separates. What we can do is we'll set it on its top and we'll loosen the quill so that handle can be out of the way. And if you need to, with the Shopsmith, you can loosen the handle itself and just turn the orientation of the handle. It'll still stay on unless you unscrew it a whole bunch. Then that'll actually come all the way off. So if you want to, you can by all means take that off as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to speed this up technically, and as it does that, what it's going to do is it's going to pull this in, because we want to get this point right here rotated down. I really hope you can see this, to where it's underneath this so that we can slide this clip off of the end. So we're going to turn that. Keeping an eye on it, make sure it doesn't catch in there. And as that hook gets down towards the bottom, then what I'm gonna do, let me turn that, is push this spring in so that I can lift this bearing clip over. And now that's disconnected, and we'll just push that right back in. And at this point, you can remove your belt from your pulley. And then we can inspect that and maybe replace that later. So if you remember, we turned that all the way through, and it's on slow now. We technically went past fast. So we're going to back that up. Nice and slow, all the way down, back to slow. There we go. And if you have to, look inside and make sure that that worm gear is towards the end. I'll show you. Make sure that worm gear is down here towards this end. And then once you get to that point, there's a small set screw inside of this cover. You can see the cutout here. So you use a pair of Allen wrenches and you can get in there and you remove that cover. So we're going to do that. Okay, just if you're curious, it is a 3/32, it looks like. So then you just loosen that, and there we go. And you can see the back side of this has teeth, and that joins up with these teeth here to allow you to rotate this entire spindle. So one of the downsides of my Shopsmith is that this spring got broke when I was putting it together last time, and I can probably get a replacement for it, which I will. But what that does is it keeps pressure on this gear so that you can keeps it separated from the back end here, so you can turn it more freely. So this piece has the 3 screws here that are holding it into the case. So I'm not going to mess with this nut. Mine still spins fairly well. I may clean out around this gear a little bit, and then we'll pull these 3 screws, and then we'll take the speed control out. I'm going to take our screwdriver here. And when you do this last one, you kind of want to hold the speed control in place, because you don't want it to fall out, fall down, get broken. Pull that last screw, and then I just grab this knob right here in the middle. Maybe turn these clamps out of the way. And there you got that out. And if you need to, or you want to, depending on the condition, you can take this and replace that as well. So that comes apart fairly easy, and then you're just left with your gear here. So there's a spring here that holds this whole plate off of this surface a little bit. It allows it to roll so you can turn it. So I'm going to leave that there. If you need to replace it, feel free to go ahead.
Okay, so we're going to pause for a second. I got some feedback about the audio quality of my videos, and I wanted to try a mic that I have here, and instead of recording the audio with the video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try just recording the video, and then I will do narration over that and see if that is more preferred than doing the audio and the video at the same time. So leave any comments in the comment section as to what you think about this method versus the earlier part of this video, and I will adjust from there. So let's continue the tutorial and pick up where we left off. Okay, so now that we got the speed control removed, what we want to do is reach underneath this and hold that pulley, because the speed control was holding the bottom side on, so we want to slide that off like so. And if we don't hold on to it, it may slide off and get damaged falling out of into the case there. So we want to make sure and hold that. So now what we want to do is remove the other end of that pulley. So there's an Allen wrench, an Allen bolt on the bottom, and then there's a Phillips screw on top. And what it is there's a cam in this hole. I'm not sure if you can see it very well, but it has a slot in it that'll allow you to turn the cam, and that'll adjust the tension on this other belt, which you'll see when we do the installation. So I'm going to remove that that Phillips screw from the top after loosening the Allen bolts on the bottom, and what that'll do is that'll allow us to turn that cam, because on the bottom of when the slot is lined up straight down, there's an Allen screw, and that Allen screw is what keeps that cam attached to the shaft for the outside of that pulley. So you see here, I'm going to turn that cam so that the slot is down, just using just a straight screwdriver, and then we're going to tip that up, and I'm going to point to it here, but you can kind of see the dark spot in the bottom of that valley there. So we're going to use the Allen wrench to loosen that, so that we can get the rest of that pulley out and not have to remove the cam with it. So you see I reach in here and support the bottom side as I loosen that so that we don't have to worry about it falling out. And then we can kind of slide the rest of that pulley down. So what I've found is the best way to get the rest of this pulley out is to turn it as you pull it down. You can kind of see that allow the belt to ride up onto the bearing housing there a little bit. And the part that I'm holding in my left hand is where the bearings are, so you want to turn this to make sure that doesn't make any noise and that your bearings are still good. These usually don't wear out, but it doesn't hurt to check it. You're always better safe than sorry. And you can even put the other half of the pulley back on it. It does have a guide slot on it so that you can make sure and get it aligned correctly, and then you can just slide that together and set it aside. So next we're going to work on the back side of the quill where that other belt goes around. I've got a pick in my hand, and you may not be able to see it, but there is a retaining ring inside of the back end of the quill. So what I want to do is get that end popped out, and then I can rotate that around and get that out of the groove so that we can get that out. And once that's out, it's fairly easy to slide the shaft out. You want to pull the belt up so that you can slide that shaft out without dragging the belt with it. And usually it just takes a little bit of a wiggle to get it past all the different bearing races. You may have to pull it out or press it out. So then you can get to these two bearings, and you want to spin them like I said with the others. We want to make sure they're still good, that there's no chattering or any bad noises that you wouldn't want to hear. So if you need to, this plastic guide on the end of this shaft can be removed. Usually it just takes a little bit of extra grip to get a good grip on it, and then you can usually pop it loose and slide it right off the end there. And then you can also get a better cleaning without having that there. But it helps to get it out of the way if you need to pull those bearings off of the end to replace those. So next we're going to work on getting the other end of the quill removed and get that belt out. So I'm going to reattach this crank handle and then loosen up both of the clamps on both sides. Make sure they're loose, and then I'm just going to move that quill forward so that we can get that belt out. And as you can see, these are the ribs that I was telling you about earlier. They run across the length instead of the later models that use, I believe it's a kind of like a serpentine belt that has grooves that run lengthwise instead of across. So you can inspect that belt and then replace it if needs be. So to get the rest of this quill out, there is a screw on top right in the center. It may be hidden under some epoxy or a silicone of some sort. I think I end up having to pull some wood chips out of mine because, as I said before, I have had mine apart. So we're going to make sure that that's nice and clean before we try to loosen it. And what this does is this keeps your forward quill from sliding too far out and disengaging from the teeth. So now that I have that screw loosened, I can rotate it forward until the teeth stop pushing, and then I can remove it the rest of the way just by hand, maybe a little bit of a twisting action you'll see here. And I hold on to that lever because that is spring loaded, and I want to let that unwind itself slowly so I don't damage the spring or the pin that holds that in there. So there I'm making sure that it's fully returned. And there you've got your forward quill out. So the quill does have a couple bearings in it, and the first thing we need to remove in order to get to that is this Allen screw that holds this block on the end. So we'll loosen that screw so we can pull that off of there. And then you can see inside of it is the bearing held in by a C-clip. So in order to get that bearing and the shaft removed from there, we're going to have to remove the C-clip, and then we'll just push that shaft and the bearing out of the end. You may have to tap it with a hammer, depends on how well it's seated in there. So there are different kinds of quills. This quill is a single bearing quill. There are also dual bearing quills and quills that are the shaft is two pieces on this end. So here you can see where I push this out. It doesn't take a lot for mine. Yours may take a little bit more persuading, or you can even tap it on a wooden block or something like that. So with this out, you can actually spin this bearing and test to see whether it's still good. And if you need to, you can use a bearing puller and pull the bearing off the end. On the back side, you can see it's a kind of a dust shield, and that's usually, if it's a 2-bearing quill, that's usually where that other bearing will be. So next I want to get the quill feed pinion out, and to do that we're going to have to start taking all the pieces off of the shaft. So you can see there, remove the handle, and we'll remove both of the wing nuts. On the dial side, there is a washer on the inside and the outside of the dial, and this washer has it slides into a key, as I'm illustrating there, and each washer has a grippy side and then a smooth side. The grippy side usually goes towards the indicator, so that can have some it's kind of like a friction wheel effect. And on the side that I'm spinning off now, it has a washer that is slightly warped to act as a spring as well as a washer, but I will show you that later as far as orientation when we get that installed. So that other set screw that I showed you earlier, which is right in the top right here, is the way we loosen that, and I need to clean that out here. And then once you get that loosened, you can slide your pinion shaft out of I believe it's the back side of the headstock, and there is a washer inside that will fall out, and it's important to keep in mind where that's oriented. And I believe I show you where that originates before I actually pull this shaft out of here. So you can see there's it's right there on the outside of that formed piece of the headstock that the pinion shaft slides into. So you want to make sure and have that on the outside next to the other guide. So here I'm sliding it out, and I'm actually grabbing that washer. To remove the guide shaft, all you have to do is push that outboard, and then you can slide that out. That's just a tube with a groove in it to align the shaft into the headstock. So at this point, the only thing that's left is I think I left that cam in there from earlier, and this headstock clamp. So in order to remove this, you can see I kind of spin the one side down, so that because this bolt has threads going both directions on it, so when you turn it one direction, both sides of the clamps either slide in or slide out, and that helps to kind of seize the headstock up on there. So in order to actually get this out, you would have to remove the handle, and I'll show you here in a second. The handle actually has a pin in it. I believe it's a cotter pin, something similar to that. So in order to get that handle off and actually pull this shaft out, if you needed to replace it, or if you're replacing the headstock so you need all the parts removed, you would have to push that pin out and then remove the handle, and then here you can see that you'd be able to actually slide that out. So here you can see I actually do remove that cam, and once this is out, and if I had removed that other handle and removed the clamp, this would be all the way down to just a bare headstock casing. So if you're getting a new casing, this is the point where you would want to start with your reassembly or tearing down the old one. So I do believe that will conclude the teardown of headstock. Look for the next video in the series where we put the headstock back together, and I appreciate anyone who's viewing. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and leave any comments below, questions, or other things that you'd like to see. And thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.